Welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network, your home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. With me, as always, Jack Fairchilds. Jack, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
It's been a couple of 3 weeks or so since we were last here, at least doing a show together. I know there was a time or two you filled in. I wasn't here, and there was a time or two we just missed. I want to explain that as best as I can, first of all, because it's a transitional period. Not for the show so much. The show is fine. The transitional period is for me personally. If you've ever had a kid in high school, a child in high school, and he reaches the series of final things that occur, final ball game, final class, final grade, graduation, prom, all these things that occur during about a month period at the end of a school year. That's where I presently am at this moment. And the reason it's fascinating is because we envision this. We know it's coming. I've always known that 2025 would be the day, the year, etc., when he graduated high school. But in many instances, as parents, we're never prepared. We're never prepared. I don't know why it is that we sense high school as this transition to something greater. Perhaps at one time it was. Perhaps it is for many now. But as much as I've tried to downplay that in my own personal life, it's dawned on me that it's actually very real for people around me and people in the community especially. During this time also, my son's a baseball player, and those of you that have been following this show and following me for years know that we're a baseball family. And I was able to watch him play his last high school baseball game just about a week and a half ago. And that was, again, very emotional, wonderful experience. What made it even better, though, in case you weren't following, is that they happened to be playing for the state championship. And I had this event of rarities that occurred down the stretch. The first one was think about this, the numbers of baseball, how difficult it is to finally reach a championship level game. And they did that, getting some difficult problems out of the way with teams that had been in their way for years, teams like Van Cleve on the coast, teams that are very good with baseball tradition. Van Cleve has beaten South Jones, my son's team, for the last 2 seasons to put them out of the playoffs. And so, wouldn't you know, first round of the playoffs, we play Van Cleve. And wouldn't you know that they beat us the first game. And so you think, oh, well, this is it. Well, South showed perseverance and persistence and stubbornness, and they fought through, and they were able to beat Van Cleve twice, and then boom, got to the second round against East Central. Same thing occurred. And what was magical about the East Central game being a pivotal round is that the winner of that particular game was able to advance to the state championship. And get this, the rarity of rarities, right? South Jones got to host East Central at home to secure the win for the state championship, or the South State Championship. Crazy moments I'll never forget, watching that final out, knowing that was his final time he'd wear the uniform on that field, recognizing how much time, effort, and energy he had worked all those years. This list of finals, this end of things that occur, it's very emotional, but at the same time incredible. And then, wouldn't you know, made it to Pearl for the state championship.
Mm-hmm.
And there you have it, 2 games there. And, of course, fortune, luck, fate was not on our side in that instance. They were defeated by a really good Lafayette team. That's baseball, right? And to think about baseball and all of these emotions and all these closing moments in my life, I was able to do a lot of writing and thinking and contemplating about what it meant. Baseball is a metaphor for life in so many ways. It teaches boys and girls so many ways, the lessons of what it means to rise after failure. Consider, in baseball, you can fail 7 of 10 times and still be an all-star. What other sport allows you to do that? But what other sport is so hard on your ego and on your mindset than 7 of 10 times failing? You bat 10 times, you're not going to get on probably 7 of those, and you have to be strong enough to be resourceful and stubborn enough to push through. And that's why I like baseball. It's a metaphor for life. Life gives us ups, it gives us downs, it gives us all these curveballs and twists and turns. And right when you think you've got life figured out, something terrible happens, such as baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm watching all this unfold. I was able to write. If you want to see some of those writings, you can go to the Senator McDaniel Facebook page, probably the same page this is streaming on, and look at some of that. And those writings are really emotional and straight from the heart in many instances because I was communicating not just thoughts, but emotions. And that's usually when I'm a better writer, is when I'm communicating from the heart. So, long story short, why haven't we been here? It's because I have been following baseball. But more importantly, I've been following my son on this series of last events. Now, very fortunate, very grateful to have another young fella coming up. He's in the 7th grade, be 8th grade next year. He's going to be playing baseball. So, Lord willing, I'll go through this one last time. But if you've been a parent and you've seen this, it can be so emotional. It can be so draining, and it can be incredibly wonderful. Every win, every loss, every opportunity, every at bat, everything that occurred, seared into my mind. Wow, how can you forget these days? So, if you wonder why we've been missing, it's because I am living life. And bear in mind, there's nothing in this world more important. I learned this over 16 years. Serving in a hellhole, there's nothing in this world more important than being around your kids and watching them mature and grow to good human beings. So far, so good with my oldest. He's a good boy. Cambridge, I'm really proud of you. Remains to be seen for my youngest. He has some growing up to do. Chamberlain, I'm just kidding. I love you very much. Now, with that said, you know why I haven't been here as much. Please forgive me. Hopefully we can find a better track schedule for this rest of 2025. Time will tell. I will say this, no matter how choppy the track schedule has been for this show, it's not nearly as bad as Congress.
No. Could anything be as bad as Congress?
No. Here's the thing, man. I saw an article earlier, just, sniffing around the internet. Who does that, right? Oh, believe it or not, there are other things to read on the internet than Facebook posts and social media posts. You can actually educate yourself by moving beyond your comfort zones and find articles. I found one by this guy, Alan Joseph Bauer. Don't know much about him, but I've always enjoyed his reading. You can find his articles on townhall.com. And the headline of this article is really interesting to me. It said, "The Age of Empty Gesture." I said, whoa, that sounds familiar. The age of empty gesture. In other words, politicians, so-called leaders, I don't believe they're leaders, that's a joke, but these individuals that put themselves up on pedestals, have you noticed that here lately there's always a gesture? There's always some posturing. There's always a position. And it's all very strongly worded. I mean, it's really in your face because social media works that way. But Jack, what do they actually do? The age of empty gesture. I can get online and I can talk tough, but what do you actually do? And for politicians that do, isn't so much bills that get passed because politicians can't control the ebb and flow of legislation as much as the leaders can. The do is how they vote. We don't elect politicians to pass laws. We elect politicians to vote, to be a voice of the community that elected them in the first place. So let's talk about the age of empty gesture, because we saw an example of it just this past week in D.C. Think about this. You run as a Republican, you say you're conservative. Okay, fine. That's the checklist, right? I'm a conservative. Trust me, you can trust me. I'm a fiscal hawk. I'm a fiscal conservative. But it's empty, the gesture is, unless they actually vote that way from time to time. Yeah, I'm going to step on toes. United States Senate, filled with all these so-called conservatives. It can't seem to balance a budget and have it in years. U.S. House, filled with all these so-called conservatives. I don't want to hear this junk about Democrats controlling X, Y, and Z. There have been moments in our illustrious history where our party has controlled the whole apparatus. What? Yes, we have the whole apparatus, and we did nothing to enforce our principles. Zero. Oh, we Facebook posted. We gave strong speeches. We hired the best media consultants money can buy. We put the best TV ads on, and you people fell for it. But when it came to our voting, you typically will forget that over cycles. And before I finish this story, I'm going to explain that to you, because I've been in the rooms where politicians will say, well, re-election's still 3 years away. The people will forget. And you people never disappoint. You always forget. You think you're on top of things. You're not, because if you were on top of things, the incumbent re-election rate wouldn't be 98% across all offices in this country. It's 98% because you're not. on top of things. You can't in one voice say how much you hate the way things are going, and then the other voice reelect the same exact people. So empty gesturing is working to confuse you. And that's why we're here. We're trying to point it out. You'll hate us for it because no one wants to admit they've been wrong for 4 generations. But you've been wrong. You keep electing the same knuckleheads. And then we finally get to the point where we find President Trump and we escalator. Well, he came down an escalator, and then we rode him back up an escalator to be president of the United States. Mm-hmm. And he finds the richest man in the world to come in, and the richest man in the world has all this knowledge and all this expertise and all this computer savvy, and his real only job is to cut waste. Mm-hmm. All right, that I told you when I first heard of this idea, I like this idea.
Loved it.
If you can find something in the government whose sole design is to eliminate wasteful spending, to eliminate wasteful positions and bureaucrats, I'm for it. I wish it were automatic and codified into law, that is, written into law, but it hasn't been. So here comes Musk with his intellect, Musk with his money, Musk with his team of young, enterprising cost cutters, and they begin a process. And I've heard this thing called DOGE. Is that what they still call it, DOGE?
I think so.
I mean, it's kind of a silly acronym, but what it really means is Department of Governmental Efficiency. And he comes in and he begins to get to work. And sure enough, he found what appeared to be instances of abuse.
He was just scratching the surface, too.
Oh, you don't even know how simple the surface was scratched. By the way, let's talk about the scratch of the surface. Mm-hmm. If you haven't been paying attention, this past Wednesday he came to the White House for his goodbye event. And it turns out that his term of service as a special governmental employee is coming to an end.
Yep.
And those positions now will be transferred to another intra-White House agency to hopefully continue these cuts across the board. He claims he's found $175 billion in cuts. That's great. I mean, it really is. No, all kidding aside, I like that. We initially were promised $1 trillion or more, right? So it didn't go exactly as planned. But hey, every dollar matters.
Yeah.
And I'm glad he found $175 billion in cuts. I'm going to say it again. $175 billion. That's a B. The budget this year, in 2024, last year, spent $6.75 trillion.
Yeah.
All right, let's say it again, because I see these things online making it sound like this was an unmitigated, wonderful success story. $175 billion in cuts he allocated or found of a budget of $6.75 trillion. It's budget dust.
Yep.
It's peanuts. It really, in the overall scheme of things, won't stop this disaster that we see looming called the federal debt. It's not. It's not going to do anything. That's how simple it was. That's how small the cuts were. And yet, when we finally came down to the great possibility of these cuts being made into law, even these small cuts, this is nothing. We're going to finally make it into law. Senator Paul has an amendment on the floor, voice vote amendment. And what he does, he wants to codify this, make it actual written law. And what, 26 Republican senators voted no?
That's
or was
correct.
It 24? It was 24
26.
26.
It was 26.
Enough to tank it.
Yeah.
Whether it's 24 or 26 is half of the dadgum caucus.
Yeah.
Okay, what was the start of this show? What was it? The age of empty gesture. And every one of those knuckleheads, everyone when they campaigned told you they were fiscal conservatives. Everyone told you they didn't believe in big federal spending. Everyone told you how dangerous the debt and deficit spending was to the future existence of this country. And yet you let them walk right back in there and do the same old foolishness. That's why it's an empty gesture. Now, this is where it gets interesting because, boy, did they have a litany of excuses.
They always do.
But it's always an excuse.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Here's what I want you to do. Find the roll call vote, right, of the individuals who voted no to making this law. Find the roll call vote of the ones that voted yes. It's the same split. On one side, you've got relatively conservative individuals. On the other side, establishment hacks. This was predictable. Conservatives, Ted Cruz, Mike Lee, Rand Paul, a few others, voted yes to implement the cuts.
Yep.
Into law. And the rest of those knuckleheads, that is, you know who they are. I don't have to mention names in here. It's the same ones that are told what to do, and they say, sure, yes, sir, right? It's the same ones. And we know leadership's got them by the, you know what? Because they do exactly what they're told. Maybe they don't have the intelligence not to. Maybe that's part of the empty gesture. Maybe they know that if they do take action that actually means what they say and say what they mean, they couldn't raise money to fool us with all these empty gestures. It really is disgusting because Musk wasn't asking for a lot.
No.
Fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a budget. And they still couldn't get the votes. And then here came the excuses. Oh, my goodness. So I want to go over those, just a couple, because it really infuriates me because when you actually dig down and look at the law, they're lying to you. They're just lying to you. Now, most conservatives were rightfully outraged at this vote, the inability to codify these cuts into law. Let me tell you why it's important, because these cuts are meaningless unless they become law. You may see some of this disappear for the next 3 years, but the instant Trump leaves the White House, what happens?
It's going right back.
So until you make it law, you really have done nothing. I keep going back to these words. What is it called, Jack? What? Empty gesture. The entire government's been built on empty gesture for the last 50 years, it seems. By the way, nobody's been prosecuted yet. I wonder why. We were promised all those prosecutions, right?
We were.
Wait. Epstein list, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Empty gestures. I'll get to that in a second. I'm not mad at Trump. It's just the swamp. I'll get to that in a second. So let's talk about this. The part that frustrated me the most was how the yes men for the establishment immediately came to their defense. And one of the excuses they had was it was a procedural red herring. They argued that for whatever reason, that if we allowed these cuts to take place in this particular manner, while they're trying to reconcile bills, right, without having to get the 60-plus votes, that somehow this would violate some internal mechanism, some internal rule of the Senate. They said they were procedurally barred from proceeding. Oh, first of all, I looked at the law. And if you look at the law there, the Congressional Budget Act, about rescissions, the reconciliation manner right before the Senate right now already contains a rescission. Section 80152. And that would have canceled unobligated Inflation Reduction Act balances. Long story short, when the rescission is later as opposed to sooner, this rule is not implicated. In other words, these cuts they were trying to make into law would not have gone into effect until 2026. It doesn't implicate the procedural rule for the Senate.
Mm-hmm.
And so, empty gestures. They were smart enough to know that if you dove down into the complexities of procedural rules, that none of you would actually read it. And they knew that most of you would be mad, but you would say, well, I guess dadgummit, they just couldn't do it. Well, what stopped them the other 75 times in the last 10 years? It's always an excuse.
Yeah.
Okay, get this, though. Here's the best argument that's not even legal. It's just rational. Great legal minds like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee didn't think this was a problem. Who's the best legal mind up there? Really, no kidding aside. It's Ted Cruz or Mike Lee. Best two legal minds in the Senate. They voted to implement and codify these cuts.
Mm-hmm.
But Murkowski didn't. Who's a smarter lawyer, you think?
Oh, without a doubt, it's going to be Cruz and Lee.
Wicker?
Yeah, move on from that plank suit.
Hyde Smith?
Not even close.
So I'm going to judge these individuals who've never opened a law book.
Yeah.
To tell me what a procedural rule is in the Senate.
Yeah.
But the ones that are brilliant will tell you it's not going to be a problem. Empty gestures. I wouldn't be so mad, but for the fact it's constantly occurring, time and time and time and time and time again. And the one thing that never happens are substantive, real cuts to the budget.
Nope.
Never. This budget keeps growing, it keeps expanding, and I've told you time and time and time and time again, it's the most dangerous threat to the existence of this country, and y'all ain't listening. You ain't listening.
They might jump on social media and exclaim, let's primary these folks, but then they'll be the very people that show up and vote for them again. It's frustrating because, again, these are the very folks who are the first in line to wrap themselves up in Donald Trump when it benefits them. But because either they're not facing re-election during Trump's term, or they just don't think that Trump won't endorse them again, so they feel emboldened to just go against everything that they said that they were going to do.
That's another example. These same senators, this 24 or whatever, 26.
26.
That did what they did. And again, whether it's 24 or 26, it's half the damn caucus. Excuse my language. I mean, we're talking about slim margins, and it's half the damn caucus. It can't even anyway. Bottom line here is, sorry about that frustration. It seems that some are arguing, I found one statement that this would have risked a shutdown. Just back in March, these same senators jammed through a 7-month continuing resolution with only hours before the shutdown. They didn't mind the brinkmanship then when it comes to increasing expenditures. Yeah. They only minded the brinkmanship when it came to reducing expenditures. Hypocrites. I don't know, man. I don't know why it still makes me mad, but for the fact that I know this is unsustainable, and I've been saying it forever. Before I go any further, I do want to point out a couple of quick things about why I'm such a panicking person, an alarmist over the debt. A few years ago, I ran against Thad Cochran. Mm-hmm. Thad Cochran was a good guy, 42 years in the Senate, but he was a big spender. And of course, he was just doing what all the other senators were doing. Yeah. Doesn't make him a bad guy. It just means, they spent a lot of money. And I really was upset. It was like 10 or 11 years ago, and I was fired up, right?
Yep.
Remember that?
I do.
The debt was only $17 trillion.
Yeah.
It's $36.5 trillion right now. It's more than doubled in just about 12 years. Let's put that in perspective. For the first 220 or so years in this country, we've more than doubled it in just 12.
Yeah.
That's perspective. And nobody seems to care. We can't even get $175 billion in cuts when they were found, most of which were complete crazy stuff. Couldn't get it done. So I want to give you some examples of what this looks like if you were just a regular Joe, regular person. Right now, about 36 trillion, 36 and a half. I mean, what's the big deal? It's just a half. $36.5 trillion. The interest, just the interest to pay for that. You know what interest is, right?
Yeah.
5 years ago, 6 years ago, about $345 billion. Now, $1 trillion. That's how fast it's growing. It's going to cost more this year to service the debt than our entire military budget. No end in sight. So let's get rid of the big numbers for a second, and let's focus on just small numbers. What it would look like if it were you or me or some regular Mississippi family, okay? Here's the way those numbers calculate to an earning income household of $50,000. Let's say a household in Mississippi makes $50,000 a year. This will be the equivalent of them spending that very year $70,000, and then putting $20,000 almost on credit cards, while already owing $380,000, with interest accrued at almost $10,000 a year. Nobody could survive that. That's immediate bankruptcy. It's over. And that's where the government is, except nobody wants to talk about it. Now, they'll say it can be forgiven, and they'll say it can be transferred. Folks, foreign investors at some point, and you may say, that's great because you don't understand what a foreign investor is. I'm talking about people that are actually buying our treasury notes, okay? These aren't communists. These are just regular folks out there looking for places to have safe investments. When it comes to the fact that the American treasury note is no longer seen as a safe investment, what happens? Because we're already borrowing about 40 plus cents out of every dollar that we use to fund the government. What happens if you can't find investors that are willing to risk investments on the United States of America? Have you ever asked yourself that question? Have you? No. It's on auto drive. But when investors say, you know what, those notes aren't attractive to us anymore. And by the way, Moody's last week downgraded us again. And what they're saying is it's getting less and less and less safe to invest in America. That's what they're saying. And if it keeps going, you're going to lose that.
And it's going to keep going.
It's going to keep going. And so the government's wise answer is to print more money, which is driving up inflation and devaluing your dollar. It's the end of our currency. It's the end of our economic time unless we find a way to turn it around. And people just close their eyes like this isn't a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Still adding debt. And look, even if we'd have cut the $175 billion, probably it wouldn't have been enough. But at least it would have been a minor step in the right direction.
Well, the hope would be that if you do make those first initial cuts, you continue to dig and you find more and you cut more. But when you can't even get Congress to agree to this, there's no point in going forward. There's a reason why Elon Musk doesn't want to continue, because he sees the same writing on the wall that we do.
Well, here's the news now. Now they're going to try to save face. I don't know if you've seen this, but now they're saying, okay, look, we don't like this pressure we're taking because those of us that claimed we were conservatives voted against the cuts. Send us that bill clean, and we'll support it. I'll believe that when I see it. I'll believe that when I see it. So when they get a clean bill, okay, this is where it gets interesting. What if the bill comes over clean, not in reconciliation? And at that stage, you have to have 60 votes in the Senate to pass it because of filibuster.
Yep.
Yeah. Then they'll all vote for it and go home and say, see, I supported it.
Yep.
They're lying to you. They're lying to you again. They knew it wouldn't pass in the first place.
That's why
they
did it
do
this
it.
way.
So here's what's going to happen. Here's my prediction. Remember, what was his name? The comedian from years ago, Johnny Carson. He put on this hat and he would predict things. Remember what was the name of the
Carmack?
Carmack. This is my prediction. It's Carmack. Here in just a short while, you'll see a standalone bill work its way through. It'll pass the House. This implementing these cuts. Go to the Senate, and all these senators that voted the other day against it will all support it, knowing they don't have the 60 votes to pass it. Watch. And then they'll advertise on TV, we supported Elon Musk in his cuts, and you'll all fall for it. You'll all fall for it. I've never seen anything like it in my life. It's like we're watching the same movie over and over and over again, and the voters can't get themselves out of it.
Sadly, that movie is Groundhog Day.
You read my mind. I was about to say.
I mean, it's infuriating, and part of the reason why you're so frustrated with it is, A, you know the end game here, and you know that it's unavoidable. If we keep on this path, we're going to drive straight off that cliff. So that's one reason why you're frustrated. But the main reason is the repetitive nature, and knowing that even though you see, or the voters see firsthand, these people aren't doing what they said they do, when they play the parlor trick that they're about to play, you'll buy into the lie, because sadly, the American voters always buy into the lies of incumbents.
You know, I told you before, the game with Trump, as far as Senate leadership is concerned, as far as probably all of D.C. is concerned, it's just to play the long game.
Yeah.
To don't let him get any major victories, or at least codified into law. And then when he's gone in 3 or 4 years, you go back to business as normal. That looks to be what they're trying to do. It's the best way the swamp can prevail, because Trump seems to be throwing punches. But unless Congress throws punches, what do you get except a short-term change that can't be placed into law and is repealed immediately upon the next presidential cycle?
Yep.
Oh, and by the way, this is all assuming, of course, that we even win in the midterms. There's a great chance you know how it works. I mean, it's not Trump's fault. It's just every time a new president comes in, they almost always lose the House.
It's just, it runs in cycles
It runs in cycles. And so if you lose that, then you certainly can't get anything codified. So here we are with this one chance to actually get cuts codified. It's not going to happen. And the second we lose the House, the Senate, all those senators will go super conservative again. They'll introduce bills, they'll talk about cuts, knowing it's impossible to get done. This is a game. This is a parlay. It's a show game.
26 sellouts. I mean, that's the best way to describe them, because either they're selling out what they claimed were their principles, or they're selling out to some lobbyist somewhere. Whatever reason, it doesn't matter. They're still sellouts, period.
It's just a game. It's just a game. And I'm not going to speak as to all the senators, because, I don't like stereotyping all, but a vast majority, a strong percentage, they're not worried about the future of this country.
No.
They're worried about re-election. And they know if they satisfy the right lobbyist, if they satisfy the right power brokers, which normally is the Senate Majority Leader on the Republican side, you satisfy that guy, he's going to raise you as much money as you need to get reelected. You'll never have to worry about reelection again. So everybody's in this ship that's sinking, but as long as they have a nice stateroom, they're okay with it sinking eventually, because their thought process is, it won't sink while I'm riding it. I'll be gone then, I'll be retired then. That's another generation's problem. No, it's going to become to the point where we simply cannot exist financially under these facts. I read the other day, not sure how accurate this is, that the national debt could be as high as $50 trillion at the end of 2031. Dude, what's the interest on that bad boy? Just to service it. Are we talking about two now? About $2 trillion? Maybe a little less? Just to service the debt? People have, I don't know, man. I mean, hey, what do we know? It's just math.
Yeah.
It's just math. We tried. We did everything in our power in 14 to turn the ship around. And, we tried. What can you do? But I know this. We're on the wrong path, and it's just sad we can't get just a few cuts implemented. This might be a good time for a commercial. We're about ready? Let's do it.
Resort.
Okay, I promise you, no more talk about the national debt because nobody cares.
They should, though.
I mean, you'll see. You'll see. Don't get me wrong. I want DEI gone too.
Yeah.
And I want a lot of things changed. But the national debt's the biggest problem facing this country. As the liberals might say, it's existential. That word's been so overused lately. Have you noticed that?
I have.
CNN, they can't have any commentator there that doesn't say Trump is an existential threat. Whatever. When did that word become so cool again?
Apparently when they just got their thesaurus out and found it.
I think so. Listen, forget debt. Nobody cares about that. Future demise of the country, we'll get through it. I've told you, it won't be zombies and apocalypse. It'll be your kids, not having the productive life that we all wanted them to have because we just couldn't curb spending at the moment we needed to curb it.
Yeah.
With that said, let's talk about Memphis. That's a transition.
There's a transition for you.
Because Memphis kind of encapsulates everything wrong right now with society, if you think about it. Memphis. I'm going to get in trouble now because for whatever reason, half of my friends in North Mississippi think Memphis is a great spot. It's not.
There was a time it was.
Turn of the century? What are you talking about?
Maybe.
What are you talking about? No, there was a time when Elvis was singing up there.
Mm-hmm.
How bad could it be, right? King,
yeah.
Sun Records and Roy Orbison.
The Peabody.
It's still there. You can't get in with an armed guard.
That's
there.
my point.
You have to have Secret Service agents to escort you into the place. And, why is that, you ask? I don't know. Democrat leadership, perhaps?
Probably.
Let's talk about that because I'm getting a kick out of Memphis right now only because it's an example of where a lot of our cities are heading because it doesn't have good leadership. Okay, so Elon Musk, he seems to be the man of the hour, at least on this show, literally. He has a supercomputer center there in Memphis. Did you know that? Let me explain what these centers are. And there are different supercomputer centers, but basically super fast computers holding on to a ton of information that we call the cloud. Mm-hmm. These centers are spread out in certain areas, and you have to have techs that work them, and they create jobs. And as a general rule, it's really well-paying jobs. Mm-hmm. Exactly the kind of thing that Memphis needs.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Musk decides it's in South Memphis. It's kind of like South Florida, I guess, except much more dangerous. South Memphis. He has this supercomputer there, and it's a huge facility, a relatively huge facility. There are bigger ones, and it turns out the NAACP now is calling for its closure. It's shut down, and this story is going to get me in trouble, and there'll be a lot of hate mail. But everything I'm about to say needs to be said about the NAACP and about this story. They want it shut down because of pollution. And I want to ask the people of Memphis, which pollutes your city more, the gunfire and the bullets, or this facility and its turbines? You can't go to Memphis without hearing gunshots.
Nope.
People are dying in the street. The vast majority of them African Americans killing each other for a variety of reasons. And the NAACP, which presumably is an organization to advance, is going after job creators in the city and not the crime itself.
No.
That's so misguided. And I know nobody wants to talk about this because it does touch on race and issues like that. But this isn't about race. This is about politics. They're more concerned about playing a political statement when it comes to pollution and the environment than they are about the grave danger to their very people and others that happen to venture inside of Memphis to get a bite to eat. To me, that is so wrong-headed. What are they there for? The protection, presumably, of a people. And they're talking about a computer system causing pollution. That's the biggest scare in Memphis. That's the biggest issue in that city is pollution.
It's insane, Chris. And again, they want to get on the right side of liberals by standing up for pollution. But let's also not forget the fact that if this is an Elon Musk facility, they're probably wanting to get on the right side of liberals by being anti-Elon Musk as well, because that seems to be a running theme these days when it comes to these liberals. They all want to attack Musk because he aligned himself with Trump, and I think that that's a factor in it too. So they're getting twofold praise from liberals.
All right, well, Memphis had 129 homicides the first 6 months alone last year. 129 homicides. That ranks Memphis as the highest per capita murder rate in the entire country. There's a lot of dangerous cities in this country. You know, I think about the subdivisions of LA out there, Compton and others, you know, where you saw that nonsense in the 80s and 90s. And here we have Memphis, right here in the South, the most violent place. The place you're most likely to be murdered would be Memphis. So the roughly 24 incidences of serious and violent crime risk per 1,000 residents. Again, that's several times the national average, the highest in the country. And yet the civil rights organization, whose core mission is to protect black lives, doesn't want to talk about that. In fact, their moral clarity should be questioned if this is the fight.
They should be questioned.
This is the fight. Something else, I researched it real quick. They're saying these turbines that help run this place are, electrically speaking, are polluting the air, but they haven't run any tests on it. So it's unsubstantiated. You hit the nail on the head. This isn't about pollution. It's about Musk.
Yeah.
It's about Musk. They saw a chance to attack Musk. One more thing I want to talk about. These jobs. These are high-skilled jobs. And the property tax that it must generate, it must be incredibly good for Memphis, right? And you have these privately financed infrastructure arrangements, and you've got all these people that need work, and they're attacking Musk. They're attacking the jobs directly.
Yeah.
You would think they'd bend over backwards to try to find solutions, and that's another point I want to make. The point of a vibrant, functioning community are associations and alliances, are they not?
It's supposed to be.
And you have a chance for the NAACP and others to have this alliance with a billionaire that could conceivably bring additional jobs and additional infrastructure to Memphis. Yet they're trying to run him out. That's the problem with the inner cities. They're thinking as Democrats and not as people.
Yep.
They should be dying for these jobs, fighting for these jobs, giving tax incentives for these jobs, whatever and anything they have to do to get people to come in and invest in their cities so the people in those cities can have high-paying or better-paying jobs and be prosperous. But no. They want to make an example out of Elon Musk. It's just weird. Not only do they lack moral clarity, it goes to show their judgment. It's just completely messed up.
And it always has been. I mean, the NAACP is not for protecting the African-American community. They're for protecting liberal African-Americans, because you notice they don't ever take a stand when there is a conservative black person that is attacked or called names. Matter of fact, they'll probably be one of the ones on the front lines attacking a conservative African-American, because that is who they are. They're a liberal organization. They're not about the people. They're about politics, plain and simple.
It must help them raise money. I mean,
I'm sure it does.
It's the darndest thing I've ever seen. I don't even go to Memphis anymore. I won't even go. And yet, this is the threat. This is the environmental threat that they're having to fight right now. I don't get it, but there's your news. And you could take that and extrapolate that into any big city in this country that's headed by Democrats. For whatever reason, and I'll let you all speculate as to the reason, They don't like fighting crime. The Democrats have shown they can't protect you. They'll never be able to protect you. They're more concerned about, I don't know, protest and
defund the police.
Well, whatever the case may be, it always seems to be backing the people that are committing the more serious crimes. And when they're not backing them, they're backing illegals that are committing the crimes. And when they're not backing them, they're not wanting to prosecute people that are committing the crimes. It's weird because even the prosecutors now are like, well, it's hands-off approach. You wonder why crime is rising. And it's consistent in almost every city a Democrat controls. And, that we ought to know what that means. We ought to have better sense to elect those people. But they're trapped, and now Memphis is trapped. And I saw where the mayor the other day has finally declared that, you know what, we're going to crack it down. What you been waiting on, brother? I mean, what else needs to happen? And apparently he's working with the feds now to find ways to crack down on all these criminals. Really, you don't say. You've had a police force for how many years, your city?
Yeah.
Do your jobs.
Yeah.
Quit playing politics, and you're going to upset some people. I promise you are. You're going to make some people mad. When you arrest that drug dealer, he's going to have a powerful friend somewhere. But you got to do it if you want your streets to be safe. But no, let's attack Musk. He's creating jobs.
Yeah, how dare he create jobs?
All right, more news. I saw this interesting turn and twist the other day. Bill Maher, he's interesting.
He definitely. He's definitely not somebody that we're going to agree with on most things, but we do find ourselves agreeing with him more often than we used to.
Well, it seems to me what's happened is his party has moved so far to the left, and now he seems like a voice of reason.
Yeah.
And I never thought in a million years I would say that, because I used to hear him and he made me roll, my eyes would roll. But at least now, particularly when it comes to the plight of the Jewish people, he's coming down on the right side of history here, right? Because now it appears our universities, most of our young people are somewhat anti-Semitic. It's the darndest thing I've ever seen. When did it become fashionable again for the liberals to hate people because of the color of their skin? Have I missed something here? Okay,
I did too.
Well, wait a second. With that said, I've been watching him lately talk about this, and you can tell that the left, the movement they've taken to the left, his party, has offended him just a bit. And he said something the other day that got me to thinking. He said this. He gave Trump credit for understanding. Now, hear these words. Because this is the fight we're in. Call it what you want, liberalism versus conservatism. This is the fight we're in. He says Western civilization is more positive than the alternative. And he hit me like a ton of bricks. It is. But nobody dares to defend it. Western civilization is comprised, if you will, of the institutions that have in large part made this country and this world a much greater place to live. I don't know why we can't say those things out loud. I don't know why they're not considered cool and avant-garde. That's the reality of history. The data shows that, right? Yeah. But if you go into American institutions of higher learning, Harvard, Columbia, wherever the case may be, you go into those schools, for whatever reason, the kids are taught that Western civilization is inherently problematic.
Yeah.
They can't connect the dots necessarily as to why it's inherently problematic, and they can't seem to disconnect that all cultures have their sins. So what they do, in fact, they point to imperialism, or they point to the sins of colonialism, or whatever the case may be, and they say, well, because of this, this, and this, it all must be bad, discounting that all cultures and all peoples have had similar wrongdoings and things that have occurred to them in the past. But it's taught, it's drummed into their heads, and that's how they come to these conclusions that somehow that Israel is wrong about the war it's waging to preserve its essence, to preserve its country. You can only come to that conclusion by maligning, if you will, the people of Israel. And that's where this anti-Semitism arises. That concerns me, because when they're attacking Israel, they're attacking concepts of Western civilization. Now, the press is part of that. The educational experience is part of that. The government's been part of that. But no place has hurt us the way the universities have. And here's why. Remember, there's two types of sciences, right? You got math and biology and all this stuff. Those are hard sciences. And they're supposed to come up with objective truth. We'll get to that in a second. Objective truth. 2 + 2 is?
4.
Good. Objective truth. Now, a liberal might argue that's racist, what you've just done, but that's objective truth. The softer sciences in the universities, social sciences, I think people used to think that they weren't quite as important because they didn't come up with objective truth. In other words, with the hard sciences, we build things and we apply things, right? With social sciences, it's a little bit different because we don't have much impact outside of the hard. Okay, look at it this way: with hard sciences like biology or mathematics or chemistry or engineering, they do conform to objective truth almost always, because empirical research and science and the ability to replicate original findings show the proper direction. It's more difficult with social sciences. It's a bit more flexible, right? But here's the problem. The social sciences affect how we see each other, our place in the world, our place in the system. So if you challenge the social sciences, where the liberals have done very effectively, and you challenge the way we see Western civilization in the scope of the world and begin to degrade it, now you're implementing significant social change. And they've done that pretty effectively. How do you regulate a society? How do you govern a society? Is it based in Western philosophy or something newer, something more progressive? They've been winning that fight. That's the problem. That's what Mar's talking about. If the universities are that dominant and we're losing that many kids, you're not going to see long before the mode of thinking changes dramatically. Consider, sometimes I read things the left writes. It seems like an alien wrote it. I don't mean an illegal alien. I mean like from another country, another world. Like, for example, have you ever had this feeling? How could you possibly believe that?
Yeah, absolutely I have.
How could you possibly come to that conclusion?
Every time I look on social media and see
Right?
some brain dead liberal post something.
Okay, exactly. But they see the same thing about us.
Yeah.
Now, it used to be we had a divide with the so-called left, and it was on minor things. How big was the social welfare state going to be? Or, should you have this much for Social Security or this much for Social Security? These were basically smaller fights in the overall system that we all agreed upon. We're not even there anymore.
Yeah.
You see what I'm getting at? They don't see the system the way we do because we've lost the fight for the social sciences. And that's why when you read their stuff, you're like, woo, that seems a little crazy. And they read our stuff and they think we're crazy. It really is an overthrow of Western civilization, the old way of thinking. So what do we lose if that happens? That's the question. And I know I'm going off on a tangent here, but it matters because if you lose the ideas, right, what's left? We're just people trying to figure out how to live. And these ideas kept us together for years, centuries, did they not?
They did.
Even Biden said the other day, America was born on an idea. He stole that from Thatcher. He didn't, that's plagiarism, but he said it.
He's known for that.
America was born on an idea, not geography and not history. That idea now is not shared any longer. What happens to countries when they can't even agree on the basic governing idea? Mm-hmm. And that's where we have to start talking. We better start talking because that's where we are. Now hear this. What does Western civilization give us that others don't? Jack, I'll let you take the first shot at it. What have they given us that others have not?
Western civilization, freedom, liberty.
Freedom, Magna Carta, the United States Constitution, European Convention on Human Rights, all of these things. The concept was to institutionalize an idea that nobody was above the law. That's neat, and that's unheard of, and that came from Western civilization. What about Locke and Montesquieu and Mill, these great thinkers that seemed, after all of these centuries of nothing, begin to establish these ideas of natural rights and property rights? That was Western civilization, and it gave us the footing for the most powerful economic engine in the history of the world called capitalism. This is not an accident. Scientific research, investment in scientific research, the use of the empirical method. This goes all the way back, I suppose, to Newton and others. Science matters. Humanity matters. And enlightenment matters. These are all concepts of Western civilization, and it gives us the things that we see today. Adam Smith, his Wealth of Nations. Capitalism is maligned. Man, have you seen what it's done for this world?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a stat for you. The countries that have adopted the economic model of capitalism, 80% of the world's gross domestic product. 80%.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It gets better. Extreme poverty in 1981, that's not long ago. You were alive. Extreme poverty was 44% worldwide. Now, 8%. 8. Politicians didn't do that.
No, they didn't.
Economic engines do that. You may hate capitalism because it creates, in your mind, wealth disparity. It creates more wealth and enough wealth for everybody to rise if they just will.
Mm-hmm.
If they just will. And the science shows that. That's Western civilization. Our love of art, literature, medicine, that's Western civilization. Institutionalized self-critique. This is an important one. Do you know in our government, if we don't like things, what do? Convince, re-elect, change. Our institutions give us the ability to self-critique every few years.
Yeah, it does.
Are we going the wrong direction? Are we going the right direction? We can fix that. That's a concept of Western civilization. International order, humanitarianism. As much as I dislike foreign aid, Western civilization has brought peace and balance to much of the world because of some of these institutional orders that it created, including NATO. Look, I guess my concern is this, and I'm off on a tangent now because this stuff fascinates me philosophically speaking. If one group of people rising in the country believe that all this is inherently evil, and the older group believes it's inherently good, how can we fit under the same government for long?
That's the question we keep asking, and I don't have an answer. Because I don't think we can.
I mean, I don't know the answer anymore. I do know this. Again, I'm beating a dead horse now, but the differences these parties used to have were relatively minor.
Mm-hmm.
They really were. I mean, whether you're Dewey or Truman, it was relatively minor. You know, whether you're Roosevelt or Taft, whatever, it was relatively minor. Not minor anymore.
No, it's not. I mean, and that's reason why people put so much into the once every 4-year president. I wish they put that much into midterm elections, but I mean, once every 40-year presidential elections, you hear it all the time. You hear all the hyperbole that is thrown out about how dangerous it will be if this guy gets elected.
Well, enough of that. The point is that we better control these institutions a little bit better, and I'm happy to see that Trump has butted heads with Harvard.
Oh, absolutely.
I thought that was the perfect fight for the administration. A, no one likes Harvard. B, it's all, elitist. C, 31% of the student population is foreign. It's kind of like, oh, that's a good fight for us.
D, they've got their own wealth and don't need government funding anyway.
Yeah, they have the largest private donor base in the entire world. Their endowment is the largest of any university in the world. And here we are throwing federal dollars at them for reasons I can't understand. Oh, I did see interesting, the Harvard president, he was like, well, how will all this research get done? I'm thinking, I don't know, not at Harvard. We'll figure it out, right?
Yeah.
Because his assumption, underlying his assumption is we're the only ones that can do it. No, there's a lot of places that can do it.
Yeah.
A lot of private sector places that can do it.
Yep.
And I'd much rather that money be utilized in private sector foundations that aren't so hyper political, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Harvard, man, all these Ivy League institutions, even the ones that beat us in baseball from time to time, all of them, like Columbia.
Oh goodness, you got to pour salt on that one.
Well, look, they got lucky. But like you said, they had to do some crazy math to get that done. It was some serious Ivy League stuff, beating us in baseball like that. Almost done here today. I don't know what else to study. I'll let you decide. AI. Okay, number one. Number two, have you seen this international or this U.S. Court of International Trade that ruled against Trump on tariffs?
I've seen that. Yes.
We'll talk about that. I was going to talk about Epstein and pipe bombs and the cocaine in the White House.
Yeah.
We were promised arrest and all of that.
Yeah.
There ain't gonna be no arrest.
No, I mean they've even come out and said that Epstein definitely killed himself, which there's still
first
people
of all,
that
they
don't
told us. I thought they told us that video had been erased.
They did.
Now they're telling us they're going to show us the video. Which is it?
Goodness.
Deep state is deep in stating. That's what's going on here.
Yeah.
A couple of quick things. As a lawyer trying to explain this international Court of Trade, this U.S. Court of Trade here. Let's try to explain it real quick, okay? Because people are mad. This is going to get people even more angry. But this is the legal. I'm not taking positions, legal analysis here. Do you remember back when Biden was pushing all that climate change stuff?
I do.
And there was a big court fight. Remember the student loan debt stuff?
Yep.
There was a big court fight.
Yep.
And each one of those, the Supreme Court kind of struck down Biden's unilateral action as the executive. Remember that?
Yeah.
Okay, they're making the same argument now against Trump.
Mm-hmm.
So it's putting these conservative justices in a very tight spot. This Court of Trade the other day that ruled against Trump, they cited something called the Major Questions Doctrine. The Major Questions Doctrine, and I'm going to make it real simple as best I can, says that Congress can't delegate, and there's something called the Non-Delegation Doctrine as well, but basically it says that on major questions like this, and they consider the student loan debt to be a major question, about $400 billion or so dollars.
Yeah.
That's a pretty major question. And they said for major questions like that Congress has to take that action. They can't simply delegate it to an administrative agency, right?
Yeah.
That kind of makes sense.
It does.
And that is a conservative philosophical principle that you got to keep each of these systems of government, that is the branches, in their respective and proper lanes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. We got 3 branches: executive, judicial, legislative, all equal, and all have unique responsibilities under the Constitution. And what the court's basically saying is on these major questions like this, you can't just delegate it to an agency and pretend you don't have responsibility. You ultimately have to be the one that decides. That's what they told Congress. Now that same argument is being applied to the president on tariffs. Now remember, Trump used an old law from the 70s to justify his tariff position. He says it's an emergency law that he has the power to act with. And now they're arguing, no, not under this doctrine. You can't do that. And those 3 judges with the trade court ruled against Trump. One of those was a Trump appointee, I think.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So it creates, from a legal perspective, one interesting dilemma as to how the Supreme Court is going to rule on this ultimately, because we have precedent now, at least as to agencies. So I guess their best argument is to try to distinguish. And you say, Trump's not an agency, he's the president. But remember, if you're Alito and your argument was you've got to keep these branches in their respective and proper lanes, then Trump may have a problem with this decision. He may have a problem with this doctrine that exists out there that helped us with 2 earlier cases, and they hurt us with this next case. I guess here's one last argument they can make. They could argue that emergency powers are traditionally exercised by presidents in this situation, and this is no different. Because it's an emergency, we give a special carve-out to these types of delegations. And I guess you could argue Congress did that in passing this law from the 1970s. But that would open up a big old hole in this doctrine that was used to validate 2 of Biden's biggest agenda items. Mm-hmm. Long story short, we shouldn't get too mad yet. Got to watch it unfold. The Supreme Court's going to have its say on this here pretty soon, and it should be a fascinating opinion, because you can just assume that the harder the conservative position, the less likely they will want to give any other branch power that should belong to Congress. That's going to get interesting.
Very much so.
I bet those law clerks are already looking at it.
Oh, they're clenching a little bit tighter tonight.
They will be. And we have to wonder, too, Amy Barrett will probably go against Trump on that one for a lot of reasons. Roberts will as well.
Roberts definitely will.
And that may not, listen, legally, I see both sides of the argument. Who knows what Alito might do, because he's a staunch constitutionalist, but he also loves President Trump, right? Thomas, same thing. These folks are pretty close. But don't be surprised if they affirm this on a 5-4. Because you're going to lose, I think you're going to lose Barrett, and I think you're going to lose Roberts.
I think you're probably right. And it could be even bigger decision than that, because you pointed out, depending on how they interpret it, it could be a wider margin. And that goes back to a thing too, I do understand people's frustration, especially with the higher court. But if we want to hold them accountable and tell them that they must adhere to the Constitution, then sometimes we have to try to look into the decision and see if we can find the constitutional argument being made.
Well, I'm gonna wrap this thing up, but here's something we cannot lose track of, right? As if you are a conservative, and listen, I'm not sure what that means anymore. We had a long intellectual tradition of what conservatism is and was, but we've abandoned that now.
Mm-hmm.
And temperance when it comes to government action, particularly executive action, should be one of those things. But if you're a conservative, these types of quick actions from non-congressional members or non-congressional actors should always give us some concern and heartburn. So, like I said, I see the legal argument both positions. I don't know how the Supreme Court's going to rule, but I do predict it's going to be 5-4 against the widespread use of tariffs. Let me explain that real quick and we'll go. There's a fraction of those tariffs he implemented that are perfectly permissible in this instance. The widespread use of the tariffs, as to all the countries all at once, the court's going to strike that down, I believe, 5-4. I think that's what's going to happen. I didn't do it. Don't be mad at me. That's just my prediction. All right. Anything else you want to talk about?
No, just good to have you back. Good to be back on. Hopefully, starting in next week, not this coming week, but next week. Hopefully, we'll be able to get back on a more regular schedule. Correct, Chris? That's the hope.
That's the idea. Life throws curveballs. You never know, but at the same time, I think that's what we should try to do. Don't you?
I definitely do. It's always a better show when you're around.
All right, I appreciate that, Jack. Thank you for being here. Guys, this has been Chris McDaniel's America. I've enjoyed it. Jack, I know we've had a good time today. This is the Midnight Ride, and we're thankful to be a part of this network, and we're thankful to be a part of the home of the anti-establishment movement in this country. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.
Looks like you've been sleeping well,
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
and you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit MyPillow.com.